3D printing for tabletop has really started to become a thing, and people have started asking, is now the right time to get into it? That's the wrong question to ask. The question that everyone ought to be asking is, do I want miniatures to play a big part of my tabletop role-playing experience? If the answer to that question is yes, then buying a 3D printer is really a no-brainer. I know that there's skepticism, I know there's concerns and questions. Let's get into them. I've bought minis from big boys like Nolzur's, Warhammer, and Infinity. I've gone direct to independent companies like Skibor, Nocturna, and Black Sun. I've bought from a bin. Heck, I've even picked up board games I don't play just for the pieces they contain. The honest truth is that miniatures are expensive. Full stop. If your hobby shop is anything like mine, then it probably doesn't have the selection that you want, which means that you're hunting online for the piece that you need. A cheap piece will probably run you between $5 to $7, and a larger piece, like a monster, might cost upwards of $100. Then there's the shipping costs. I'll even fill out an order with minis I don't need, just so I'm not paying more on the shipping than I am on the pieces. Now, for comparison, a single bottle of SLA resin, it's about 1,000 grams, cost about $40. $40 paid for 40 miniatures, including an oversized Super Boss. This single bottle paid for itself and for the printer, and I didn't even pay for the printer. I converted Visa points into Amazon gift cards to buy it. I've heard people claim that the detail is too poor for miniatures, and this is simply not true. I own a first-generation Frozen Sonic Mini. It's a $300 SLA printer. SLA is when the printer extracts the print from a resin vat, versus PLA, which is when there's an articulated arm that does the printing. The resolution on my character minis is comparable to the Nolzur's brand. It puts Icons and Reaper to shame, actually. The only products that I have that are any better would be the Warhammer plastic minis or the Nocturna acrylic resins, which are of comparable detail, but maybe aren't as brittle. I wouldn't recommend using an SLA printer for terrain simply because of expense, but PLA printers have worked very well in that arena from what I've seen. Likewise, I wouldn't recommend using a PLA printer for character minis simply because the cost of the printer is that much higher for the resolution you would want for a miniature of that kind of detail. If you're comparing the time that it takes to print versus the time that it takes to click buy now on a website, then yeah, it's going to take longer. But if you're comparing the time it takes to print to the amount of time that it takes to ship those miniatures to your house, well, come on. I've waited for weeks for minis to arrive only for them to show up 2 days after I needed them. Whereas a single bottle of SLA resin, that'll arrive at my door in 3 days from Amazon Prime, and the print will take 5 hours. 3D printing is miniatures on demand. It's true, my first 5 to 6 prints failed. After that, my failure rate dropped to about 1 in 20, 1 in 30. The lesson for me was discovering that the FEP, which lines the bottom of my resin vat, required a special lubricant, which I can buy for $20 at Home Depot. After I employed that fix, my failure rate dropped off. Now, the only reason why I have failures is because of a poorly supported model, and I can fix that too with 15 minutes in a slicer program. I can't speak to the failure of PLA machines simply because I don't own one, but the people that I know who do have said similar things about their machines. It's typically user error that's the cause. The actual assembly of printed minis is less intensive than most resin builds that I've encountered. In fact, they can get pretty warped. The setup and takedown between individual prints maybe takes about 15 minutes. There are dozens of awesome Patreon subscription services out there to get your hands on 3D minis. Yes, I'm not going to print everything that I get from them, but they sit on my shelf of storytelling possibilities all the same. I'm no longer at want for the minis to represent the kind of encounters I want my players to have. Now, they're just a print away. What's more is I feel that there's less compromise on my table. I am not sponsored by any 3D printing companies. I'm just telling you the way that I feel about it. What SLA printing means to me is that I get the miniatures that I want in the quality that I want when I need them at a lower per unit price point. So if you want miniatures to play a big part in your tabletop role-playing experience, the best investment you can make today is a 3D printer.